Hello, everybody. Welcome to another segment of the Pivoted Success podcast, hosted by our friend Sean Cochran from TCC Canada and myself, Jared Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events. Today, we're very pleased to be welcoming Greg Weatherdon, a very active business community leader, author, and writer. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's great.
So, Greg, let's talk a little bit about your background. Who are you and what are you all about, please?
Wow, my background's a whole segment in itself. I'm not sure we have that much time, but I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. I grew up here in Ottawa, but I come from a large family, and I was a kid, had the snow shovel over my shoulder in the wintertime, and I was not that old, but I was shoveling people's driveways. And summertime, I had an old lawnmower. I cut people's lawns. I had paper routes, and part of that was not that I had at the time any entrepreneurial aspirations. It was I came from a large family. Dad said, "Do you want an allowance? Go earn it." So it was one of those things that it just did. But that work ethic, if you wish, has served me well through life. I went on to went to high school, of course, and then graduated and tried college. That didn't work. Just wasn't time. I was too much of a hurry to get out and get working for a living. So I have a really ugly transcript from Algonquin College for, I think there was 3 semesters, something like that. But I went off. I had a part-time job at Sears delivering furniture. And I decided to try to make that, full-time work. I love driving trucks. So I did that for, 4 years, 5 years. But I always wanted to, and dreams are always important in people's lives. And we seem to dismiss them. And I really have trouble with that. But I always wanted to drive long-haul tractor-trailer. I have no idea why, other than I was a truck driver. So fortunately, the opportunity came up, and I got to do that for a couple of years. But the beauty was I toured rock and roll shows. I mean, I had hair down to my shoulders. Some of the world's biggest bands at the time, Styx, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, did a little bit for Kiss. So I would be gone for 3 months at a time. Great job for a 20 to 22-year-old single. Life was good. I mean, and by the way, I just want to clarify, all those stories you heard about rock and roll and the party and all that. Yeah, well, they're all true. So but anyways, I realized as you're night after night, the only thing keeping you company on the highway is your CB radio and the headlights from the oncoming vehicles. This wasn't going to take me to, at that point, what I thought I wanted to do with my life. So I left truck driving, but I'll be honest, I'm a truck driver at heart. But I got into sales, and the reason is I really didn't have any formal training in anything. So my dad was a sales guy, and I decided to go that route. So I took a bunch of, I'm going to call them crappy jobs, but they were entry-level positions to, get the training you needed. Eventually, I ended up at Nabisco Brands. And from there, I went from a minor account rep, or junior account rep, if you wish, to a variety of positions, major account reps down to Burlington. Literally, we had 4 houses in 4 years after we got married. We went from Eastern Ontario to taking over the Southwestern Ontario area into head office. From head office, I pissed somebody off. They sent me to Winnipeg for 2 years as district manager for the Prairies. And there's a whole story behind that statement. It's quite humorous. At the end of 2 years, I came back to Ontario as regional sales manager. So that was a great training. And it's one of the things I talk to entrepreneurs about is having industry experience really matters. So over that 6-year period where I went from kind of an entry level to middle manager, I learned a tremendous amount about the industry, the packaged goods industry, which allowed me to launch my first company, which is called the Sales Support Company. And it was a for-hire part-time sales force. So major companies always had seasonal activity. They have major initiatives, new product launches. And when you look at just Canada, because we have done work in the US, but you just look at Canada, there's 10,000 pharmacies here. And there was a time when, for the most part, all those pharmacies were covered by company manufacturer reps, if you wish. But as the 80s unfolded into the 90s, they reduced coverage and they orphaned all these accounts and essentially said, you know what, take care of yourself. Your wholesaler will deal with you. And there was an opportunity for us to go in and create this part-time supplemental sales force.
So I was the first one. Would you say that the late 80s, early 90s opened up more of the concept of entrepreneurship because of that?
I think it was there. I mean, a lot of the people I knew were entrepreneurial. Whether they actually took the risk, but there was an attitude of the go-go 80s, which allowed you to expand your risk taking. I'm going to use something else, but we'll stick with the term risk taking. And companies encouraged it to a certain extent, or turned a blind eye to it. And not that anything fraudulent, not like that, but they allowed you to run your course. There was a lot of young people in relatively important positions in some companies, certainly Nabisco. They in the confectionery division is the division I worked in, and there was 6 divisions. But yeah, we had a lot of latitude for a young group of guys and girls to make it happen, and we did. Those numbers and market share and all that stuff. So I think there was a genesis of there for the entrepreneurial movement, because there were discussions at that time about being more entrepreneurial in the workplace, which is something I think is lacking in a lot of cases now, to allow people to make the next logical jump.
So, Greg, with all of that experience you've had, I'd like to talk a little bit about your book as well. But before we do so, let's talk a little bit how you were affected by COVID.
Fair enough. And just for my background, I'm probably halfway through it. Just I told you those second, but that's fine. COVID is interesting. I mean, so my last company, the Marketing Resource Group, I managed to sell and exit about 14 years ago. So I was fortunate in a position that I didn't need to work anymore, which was great. Problem with that, when you achieve your goals, it can be kind of upsetting or disturbing or challenging, because being somebody who was driven through goals, when you finally reach them all of a sudden you step out and go, okay, now what? So one of the things I did, I wrote the book that people said I should. It's called Get More Life Out of Your Business, available on Amazon. So from there, I also got into the speaking circuit. Now, this, again, what drives a lot of people, I really didn't have that financial, I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have to worry about in that respect. So my drive was probably on 4 instead of 9. However, one of the things about public speaking is it's really much like a rock and roll band. And I say this because you start off with kind of the garage band thing, bring your own chair, bring your own beer, we're going to perform for you. And then if you're really lucky, you get to do the high school dance on a Friday night, and you know, they may give you $100. Then you move all the way up to the C circuit and the bars, and wow, you get $300 and all the beer you can drink afterwards, and so on. So, you know, very few people make it to the A circuit. Public speaking is very much like that. And you start off doing a whole bunch of free events, and then you start to the low cost. And you know what, to get to your question, or answer your question, the thing is just before COVID hit, I was starting to hit the stride in terms of, I was doing about a dozen events across Canada in the last year, when I was like, yeah, this is working. And hello, COVID. It just took the legs out from underneath you, because it is a slow process. There's hundreds of people out there that are call themselves public speakers. Whether they're good or not is a different statement, but everybody thinks it's glamorous. It's tough going, because you know what, and again, my style is not to create all the hype. It's really to give people a roadmap. So COVID took the legs out from underneath that. And I, again, not being motivated in the same way, my motivation was to share information with people and to help them avoid the mistakes that I made. And that was it, really. And sure, you got paid for it. However, moving on to online platforms, there was such a disconnect and turmoil going on, I just backed away from that. I did a number of online events over the last 2 years, but not to the same extent. So, that answer your question, yeah, it whatever I had going there just got shut down.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, anybody we've had the opportunity to speak to that was doing anything live in person to an audience was pretty dramatically affected. Not that the whole world wasn't, but I mean, for you and the public speaking, it's tough, I think, for anybody to pivot that to an online expectation, because I mean the experience is different, right, than something that's live. So as sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, tremendously so. One of the things, and I should have mentioned, is why I didn't really pivot is my energy comes from the audience. And me talking into a screen, okay, there are moments, there's an application, but for the most part, I can do the things I want to do now. And so I choose to do them. And for the most part, so yeah, I didn't need to pivot to online, and that's all right. I still wrote for a number of industry magazines. And so I got my message out that way. But yeah, I can, you know what? It's very true. It's not for everybody, the online world.
No, and it's tough as well, because again, when you look at things like sport or comedy or public speaking, you do draw a lot from your audience, and doing that by yourself in a room is a very strange experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, people have told me I should be in a room by myself, but the pajamas with the long arms, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, no, it is. As I said, I get to do the things I want to do, and I've been fortunate that way.
But let's also talk about those who showcase their talents in front of an audience. You know, you're talking about public speaking, but also, poets in some cases, or comedians. Everybody's had to adapt. And so in your case, you're privileged enough that you can do what you want. You know, you could go online, you could go travel if you want to travel. But how have you observed, Greg, during COVID? Like, what are you doing to help other people to adapt? Like, let's talk a little bit about your podcast.
Okay, that's called the Small Business Minute, and there's 103 episodes, I believe, right now. And part of my messaging, again, and good or bad, I'm not about hype. And one of the challenges I have, and I've taught entrepreneurship at a college, and I've also been an advisor at an incubator, and so I've met with over 1,000, excluding the students, I've met with over 1,000 one-on-one meetings with entrepreneurs. So I have a real good idea. There's a bunch of challenges out there that people, they're looking for quick hits. First, part of society has changed that way. Social media has done that, the 15-second soundbite. But on top of that, part of what COVID did is came out of the blue in terms of the restrictions that were placed on people that I don't think they really anticipated. And so I tried to focus my activity in terms of the podcast, and which is pretty consistent, is helping people keep moving the peanut ahead. The problem is a lot of people that shouldn't be self-employed. The post-secondary, many of the municipalities or regional governments and whatever have done a real disservice. A lot of the hype out there is saying everybody could be an entrepreneur. The failure rate is extraordinary, and people are thinking it's easy because they're making it sound that way. People aren't prepared. They're not experienced. They're not being told, no, come back with a better idea. I did that. I certainly took my grief a number of times when I was interviewing prospective entrepreneurs as an advisor. Sometimes I just tell them, no, that's not a great idea, and here's why. Many appreciated it because the whole point is, fail fast is a horrible, horrible statement out there. It hurts. Failure really hurts. And failure may take you out of the game permanently. You may never come back. And my job was, and still is to make sure people understand that risk. Because if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, chances are your time will come. But don't be in such a rush. Everybody's in a rush because it's really cool. Shark Tank says it's cool, and Dragon's Den, and oh my God, it's so easy. It really isn't. And I'll give you an example that I think Apple and Android, for instance, combined have over close to 2 million apps on their platforms. I can't tell you how many people would come in looking, say, I'm going to do an app. I'm going, the world doesn't need another app. It's as much as saying the world doesn't need another pizza joint. No disrespect to the pizza owner. However, there's a pizza shop on every corner. What's your point of difference? Ooh, it's oven, it's wood fired, it's thin crust. We're running out of options here. So why jump into that pool?
Greg, you talked a bit about the soul, or the concept of entrepreneurship. It's a buzzword. Entrepreneurship has for many years, I think. The whole concept of fail fast. Your next one will be better. we just interviewed a fellow named David Sachs who wrote a book called The Soul of an Entrepreneur.
Okay.
We're not going to get into it much, but his whole concept was the Silicon Valley hero entrepreneur myth is exactly that. It's a myth.
Sure.
But you are trying to help people realize that, you know what, when somebody says fail fast, you know, when you have your mortgage, your house is mortgaged, like you can't pay your bills because you're bankrupt. Are you going to want to do that again?
You may not be able to.
Yeah.
You might not be able to. I mean, as I said, go be entrepreneurial where you are at the moment, because it may surprise you, number one, but two, you're going to gain that experience and you get an understanding for the market. You know what, just because you worked in a grocery store doesn't mean you can create an app, as an example. I mean, that's an extreme example, but that happens all the time. And, you know, stick to what you know, because there was a study done, and I can't remember, I apologize, and I can send it to you later if you need it, but they said that the older entrepreneurs, which was shocking because I started relatively young, however, it was painful for the first year. The older entrepreneurs who had experience have a far greater rate of success. And because if you're in an industry that you understand, you can see the opportunities. This emotional stuff that's going on right now with entrepreneur, I think it's been tampered down a little bit because of COVID, or a lot. I mean, to give an example, they're anticipating 96% failure rate, over 90% in COVID. And I think it's going to be really high, higher than it ever was.
Well, is that because the side hustles, like people are thinking, oh, my day job is finished, so everybody's saying I'll start a side hustle. And so you're saying that stat is high because it's like overinflated. So many people are thinking, oh, how hard is it to start a...
There's, first off, how the population at large, the question remains, for instance, if you know hospitality business, how quick are they going to be to return? Number one, that could be really challenging. Sean, in your case, you know, the work from home and its many forms and temporary office space, what's that going to look like? I have a prediction. However, what's that going to look like? When you look at people in hiring people is such a challenge. They also have tremendous debt. Most of them have taken the grants from the government, and that comes home to roost. I think next year, I recall, and I know they're not going to be prepared. The problem is COVID, in its sense, is a healthcare issue, for example. However, it was an economic issue also to the entrepreneurs, and most of them are, you know, 10x your business, crush it. Let's reinvest everything into it. What nobody told them is to create a safety net, and they didn't. And granted, this thing has gone on far longer than we anticipated, but it literally, they talk about 50% of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck. Well, entrepreneurs, I think, were worse because they're dealing with cash flow, but they didn't have any safety net. They weren't ready for the economic impact of this. And that's kind of the crux of it. I don't know how quick people are going to return. There will be a surge, but people may go back to what, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges out there with COVID is to the entrepreneur is, if you didn't have a good business before, you're going to be in trouble. One of the things I constantly, as soon as it hit, was, okay, who are your regular customer? Who are your existing customers? Forget chasing new ones. Your goal is to stay alive, forget profit. The problem is most of my clients, I'd already talked to them about putting money aside. So it was really just tread water till we get through this and understand what's coming of it. But don't go after new customers. Because if you've done a great job of servicing existing customers and you have the data, focus on them. There are a lot of businesses out there, you know, and I wrote a blog and a podcast about it. What if there was no new customers? What would you do? And when you ask some entrepreneurs, they're deer in the headlights. They don't know because their business is based on grinding through or churning through new customers all the time. So again, that's part of it is what kind of business. And if you want to do it for the long haul, and you know, the whole adage about working hard, you know, just you know, work harder, do more. Really, if that was the only criteria for being successful, I mean, there'd be so many millionaires and billionaires out there. It's crazy. We all work hard, but it's getting the emphasis on the right syllable. And a lot of that messaging isn't coming out.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say too about the preparation for this. So, I mean, even a responsible entrepreneur who had savings and things prepared for a downturn, I can guarantee wasn't anticipating a shutdown, because that's not really something that, at least in my lifetime, I'd even factored in as a possibility. So, I mean, for us, the sudden turn in March, I mean, in 17 years that I've been in the office business, I'd never all of a sudden had no leads and no interest and no phone calls. And it was such a weird experience. So for so many different people in so many different industries, it was a sudden just stop to life and business and everything. And honestly, we're still trying to pick it up, right? Because it's been 2 years. And like you said, for the hospitality industry and the office industry, to be honest, nobody knows when it's going to be safe enough for everything to be back to what we would call normal. So it's a scary time still operating now, as we're sort of hopefully getting towards the end of it, right?
And I think the future, I'm holding out hope that we get back together again. I'm not drinking the work from home permanent Kool-Aid. That we're social beasts. Look what's happened to people's interactions since COVID has hit. They went from polite, oh my God, to it's all confrontational. And I used this term with Jared the other day. On social media now, one dog barks, every dog starts barking. If you've ever been in a neighborhood, it's like that. A dog, they don't know why they're barking. It's just like, oh my God. And everybody's in your face. Politeness is gone. Part of that is just being, stuck in the room by yourself and lonely in your only outlet. Social media is a horrible platform for trying to have a normal conversation anymore, because people are lonely, I think, and they're just opinionated. We all have our opinions. That's fine. How we communicate that is another point. Nobody's tolerant anymore. So I think COVID's had a bigger impact, and then especially for whatever demographics really use social media. There's a challenge coming in terms of how do they re-engage with community at large. People are short-tempered. Yes, we're frustrated, no question. All age, this thing is, whoa, on with it, move, turn the page. It's not happening quick enough for people. However, we still have to be vigilant. But what about engaging these people? What about when we get back together? Are we going to be yelling at each other in the, at a networking event? It's a little bit. That's what I just think. People's politeness has gotten kicked down a few notches. So when they get back to work, what's going to happen?
So this is a good lead into our next question, Greg. What are you most excited about, let's say, for the next 6 months or a year out?
For me personally, just get back traveling. I built my life around, we travel extensively, and all of a sudden it was like hitting the wall without an airbag. It's like, wow. And it just, So I'm a curious person. So to me, that's kind of personally, what am I looking forward over the next 6 months is the rhetoric and the noise gets turned down on so many things, but because you know what, when we're out and about, we're not watching TV, we're not on social media. When we're stuck inside for whatever reason, whether it's the weather, we live in Canada, for God's sakes. I mean, it's been so pleasant the last month or so. Sorry, gut, I just hit the, okay. It's been so pleasant for the last few months, and we've been inside a lot. So I just think looking forward to getting back and socializing, and I'm hoping that comes of that. That's really quite a highlight. I miss the interaction and the social engagement, especially with entrepreneurs. It's my passion. It is what I'm all about, small business owners, and not having the ability to engage with them is, it hurts. So I'm hoping we get back to some of those things.
How about from the personal speaking perspective? I know you were hitting your stride pre-COVID. Are you looking to jump back into that, or did that defeat your drive?
No, I think I'm not sure. Quite frankly, I'm not sure. I've penciled out a couple of books at this point, but writing a book is a lot of work too. I mean, believe me, I'll write a book. Yeah, you start. I mean, I think I'll be honest. My first book, in the first 4 years, when I started, I got 4,000 words done. When I finally said, "Okay, I got to get this done," I think the word count is 40-some thousand. That was done in the next 6 months and published. But it was a tough go. And I started sketching out one as lessons from a pandemic. And one of the concerns I have is that we're there were no lessons learned from this pandemic from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And I've got quite a bit written about that, whether there's a need to forge ahead. I had to get the thoughts down. So that to me is possibly one, and one begets the other. I mean, you write a book, but I'm not a great self-promoter. And that's part of it. I'm not necessarily driven. I probably need to engage some kind of PR individual to take that and run with it, because if it was up to me, I'm, at this stage and being fortunate, it's like, oh, bicycle, butterfly.
So Greg, would you find that might come across as a little confrontational if you publish no lessons have been learned in entrepreneurship because of COVID? I think a lot of other people would disagree with that.
Oh no, I didn't say no lessons. I said lessons from the pandemic, and then part of that is those that survive have never ever extended themselves. Those that survived had built up a cash cushion. Those that survived had staff extremely well trained, took the time to delegate and train. So there's all those things. Those are the lessons from the pandemic. And going forward, how do you maintain, or how do you create that kind of company? I use the example of, go back to the Middle Ages. In Germany, I think the guilds were started, and that's really the trade unions at the time. And parents would take their children to a master, whether it's a mason, whether it's whatever, but a tradesperson. And if they wanted their son or daughter to have the trade, they would take. And sometimes they would pay the master to train these individuals. Other times, the master would take them on pro bono, other than food and lodging. So essentially, for the next 7 years on average, that individual, that young child, would work with the master and do, they're doing all the gopher jobs and whatever, and that's fine. That's part of the training. Eventually, over time, that apprentice would have the opportunity to become a journeyman. Now, journeyman is a mashup between the word journée and journey, French and English, and it meant that they could travel. Essentially, they had learned enough skills that now they can work for the master and go and earn revenue for them and travel. And again, that's another 7-year process to acquire the skills, ultimately becoming a master. And the master is when a group of masters get together and designate that it says, okay, Jared or Sean, now you have sufficient skills to be a master, and now you can open your own shop. I use that example as, we don't train anybody anymore. I see it time and time again. We hire people, expect them to be fully baked coming into an organization. One of the biggest problems companies have, and I don't care what size, is there's no more mail rooms. I've said this for years, is the mail room is with the entry-level position where you worked your way up through the organization, understood the culture, got the promotions. And I'm not saying that it's a lifelong thing, but there was a mechanism in place to advance people and to train them. We don't do that anymore. Everything is, look, I've heard it so many times. Look it up on YouTube. Really? That as an entrepreneur, how do you transfer your passion? How do you transfer your vision to the individual? One of the things I used to do, and my style is management by walking around. It always was that way. Don't put me in front of a desk. I just as soon sit with you and discuss. Now, the nature of my last company was a call center, so we had about 20 people working in there, and I'd be all of a sudden engage in a conversation with one of my staff, and the supervisor and project manager would come over to me and she'd go, Greg, go back to your office. We got work to do. But during those conversations, it wasn't just chit chat. How was your weekend? Here's why we do what we do. Here's the nucleus of this, or the genesis of the idea. Here's what we need to do. Here's why the clients hire us. A lot of that is missing. I've been into a couple of stores recently. I've made notes. There'll be a future podcast, is the language people are using now in stores. I was at a retail shop, and they go, the young gentleman, nice guy, says, want a bag? As opposed to, sir, would you like a bag with this? The language is very slang. There's lots of things happening that, yep. Well,
that's probably going to get exacerbated during COVID because less people skills. Like, look at the younger generations, like no school. They're not students aren't hanging around with their colleagues. And I think, you probably read another book about this.
Well, there's the training aspect. Nobody's watching this stuff. They're letting people, they may be competent running the cash and knowing product knowledge, but how are they communicating, interacting with your customers? What's the language? You know, in Quebec, sagrat. It's just like somebody, fingernails on a chalkboard is like, really? This is supposed to be a professional environment. So have we let our standards down because we're stressed? Rightly so, I get the stress, but that just means what's going to happen going forward.
I love the comparison to the apprenticeship when you're talking about even sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, because people jump into it seeing the victory of people from the Shark's Tank or the Dragon's Den or Silicon Valley and think, well, I can do that. I'm smart, or I'm a hard worker, or whatever it is, but they haven't lived and gone through all of those things before. So the idea of fail fast so you can learn is fine if you have A, the resources to be able to pick yourself up again, and B, you're actually learning lessons, not just failing over and over. So I think the idea of having that training, I mean, think of how many less businesses would fail in that initial stage if they had some of that background to start with.
Well, the numbers are there. And I said there was an article, it was pretty high. They had a 45% success rate of over 40 years old or something like that. And, you know, my two, okay, I was involved in 7 companies, founded or co-founded. Not proud of a few of them that really didn't go. And the thing is, you have a little bit of success, you think you're invincible, when in fact you need to stick and focus to your to what you're doing and become that expert and go extremely deep into the industry so that people look at you as being an expert. My last company, the one that I sold, and the last company I sold, I should say, it was 17 years, and the only reason I could start that is for my background at Nabisco, but that was 8-10 years later after I'd left and struggled with my first company, which the only reason I could start it. And again, it was unique. And however, competitors came in a hurry, much deeper pockets. But regardless, the only reason I could do that is I had the knowledge. I saw where the window was. As I went to the next, my last company, the same thing applied. I could see clearly this massive window of opportunity of these orphaned accounts. And sure enough, I remember talking to people. My clients were the Fortune 500, the Bayer, the Pfizers, the Johnson & Johnson. I'd go to them initially. They knew me from my previous companies. And they go, "You want to do what?" And it was like, yeah. And I made it attractive enough to get them to sample. And they were blown away. And quite frankly, I was happily blown away that the results we got, that you could see that window. Somebody on the outside looking in, and I've interviewed or advised many people, say, I got this great product that I want to create and make. Have no idea what goes into retail, how to get that product, let alone manufacture. But trying to get it through the distribution channels, the head offices, they just think you can walk into Shoppers or Loblaws or Walmart and go, good luck. It's not that, and it's even gotten worse over the last 10 or 15 years. It's very restrictive and incredibly expensive. They don't realize that a listing at a chain could be easily around $50,000. Just the right to put it in the shelf, and you got 3 months to prove. If it doesn't perform, it's gone. But my point, and I don't care if it's that or opening a hot dog stand, you need to understand what you're getting into before you can do that. And the more knowledge you have, oh my God, it makes, because even that's difficult and it's challenging to be successful. Yet you have all that knowledge going in that you can talk turkey, you can talk industry knowledge, you can talk about contacts within the industry. It makes it so much easier.
Well, you know, Greg, you brought up the concept of wisdom, entrepreneur wisdom. There's a lot of resources out there. And I would agree with you that, you know, the Shark's Tank, the Dragon's Den, that's made for TV. And the Silicon Valley myth, that though, you know, the 0.001% of the Elon Musks out there, the rest of us are hard-hitting single entrepreneurs trying to make a living. Let's talk a little bit about the wisdom that you offer. Would you like to talk a bit about your book, please?
Yeah, it's really about the things that an entrepreneur needs to do to enjoy the process. The problem is to your point, Jared, many of us, we're not the unicorns. We never had unicorn companies. We didn't hit the $1 billion valuation. Now, to be in all honesty, my first company, yeah, I had aspirations of the Caribbean office, you know, and boy, it'd be nice to have that private plane to fly wherever. That all happens, and I call that the pre-teenage years as entrepreneurship. Then reality sets in and you go, oh my God. But we work so hard as entrepreneurs. We're on 24/7. I don't care. 7 days a week, we're on. The switch is on. You can't walk away from what you're doing if you're engaged in your business. You may think, that little voice on your shoulder, the first few years, you don't know what to do with it. Eventually, when you get a little bit of wisdom or whatever, you manage to grab hold of it and put it in a little box for the weekend. But you know what? It still screams at you all the time. And so we need to be able to bring down the level. Why do you go into business in the first place? When I ask people, they go, there's always the list of 5 or 7 things. I want more money, a better lifestyle, be my own boss. You go through the list and your order may be different than the order of my list. But the thing is, it's the same things we all want. Yet 6 months, 18 months into it, the list is gone. You're miserable. You're working your butt off. You have no idea where to go. So the whole point about the book is to get you focused on doing the things that are important and consistently, and do them right and do them well. Really, as an owner, we have 5 things to worry about: sales, marketing, operation, administration, and HR. You know what? Underneath those is a whole bunch of things. It's not more complicated than that. And people need to analyze, instead of going after the flavor of the week club, whatever's being promoted on whatever platform, YouTube, social media, whatever. It's really, okay, what am I doing here? And you should be, the thing is, we can't be experts in all those categories, but we need to commit to learning and understanding what is good advice and bad advice. There's always been lots of hype out there before, you know, the social media. However, it's been able to, not everything is going to work. And understanding where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. We have to be good at all those 5 categories as entrepreneurs, until such time as we can hire somebody that may be better, or at least train them to be at your level, which isn't hard. When you have a weakness or one area you're not very competent at, it's not hard to bring somebody up to that level. And at that point, you hope that they will move forward and become better at it. And then you get to focus on the things you like. And as time goes on, your area of expertise has to be general, but it gets focused on. If you're good at sales or customer relationships, that's what you get to do. It's your business. You have a right to do that. And also, what kind of customers do you want? Not everybody's your customer. And it's identifying that. The first couple of years, we're just happy to see anybody, I believe. And you know what? Some of the worst customers I had were in the first few years, because you're hungry, you got bills to pay. But once you start to identify the better customers and the better segments of your business, go hard. Forget about, because the thing is, well, I don't want to lose these customers on the fringe. That it's like, don't worry about it. They'll still find you because they found you in the first place. If you're going to market, promote, or focus on, I call it follow the money. What's driving the majority of your revenue? Yeah, I don't care if it's 40% of your revenue and the rest makes up 60%. There's an interest in whatever product or service or category that 40%. Go hard, go deep, get rid of the rest. They'll still find you. So it's things like this. It's training your people. And I use examples in there about delegating. It's not hard to delegate. It's a journey. If a process has, let's say a process takes 10 steps to complete. Well, and you look at it and you go, oh, you know, they don't understand. Well, maybe if you taught them the first 2, now they hand the remainder over to you. You've just given up potentially 20% of the effort to them. And now you're left with the 80%. Over time, you give them the 3rd, 4th step, 5th step. As their training comes up, all of a sudden they're doing 50% of that, whatever it is, whether it's writing a report, whether it's prospecting, whatever, and so on and so forth, that you're probably over time only left with the number 9 and number 10 to do, because that's your area of expertise. But meanwhile, you've delegated this. You've empowered these people. And one of the things we're talking about now, the whole work from home, the staff shortages that are going on is you better be rehiring your people. And I say to that, yes, okay, but how did you unhire them in the first place? How did you neglect them? What's important? And the last thing is, when I set up my last company, which was huge, huge changes, is why are you going in the business? And most of us, again, that freedom, the leadership, the ability to work, that doesn't mean we need to work 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that's a badge of honor to too many entrepreneurs. Oh yeah, I'm killing it. I'm working. Really?
Yeah. Living on coffee and vitamin C. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a failure on my part. And it took me, believe me, that was hard learned. I was the guy leaving home at 6 o'clock in the morning and not getting into 11 o'clock at night okay, I did it and learned the hard way. When I started my last company, I said, I'm not taking any work home at nights or on weekends. Best freaking thing I ever did. And it got to the point that I distinctly remember people over a stretch of period going, how can you be an owner? You seem so relaxed. And I'm going, yeah, because I knew I couldn't do it all. So I delegated and trained everybody. I put tremendous efforts in training the people. In the early days, I had to do it all, but I still didn't take work home. I said, why shouldn't I be relaxed? And I said, the company runs without me. And that's ultimately get more life out of your business is the company should run. What happens if you get taken out by that bus? What if you're out for COVID? What if you want to go away? I mean, we've always traveled. And one of the problems was we couldn't go away for more than 13 days because payroll was every 2 weeks. We had to be back, sign checks and all that. It was just chaos. Over time, we found a better way of doing payroll service, which was better. It freed us up. We didn't have, the hours had to be submitted. We didn't have to sign anything. Number one, we could travel for weeks on end and the company ran along. I had a quick story here. To give you an example. And again, I'm a grade 12 truck driver. So it's not like I got any special degree, but I poured a lot of time and effort into learning. But we went on a trip, and one of the rules were, don't call me unless the place floods. Okay, and it was tongue-in-cheek, but they understood, and they were empowered to do it. We were on the top floor of a 3-story building, okay? So we're not going to flood, seriously. Anyways, I think about 6 days into the trip, I got a phone call. I'm going, oh, okay, what's going on? Something serious. And literally, my main person said, okay, you told us not to call unless we flooded out. We're flooded out. I'm going, what? So my daughter was skating internationally in Europe, and it was whatever, I think we were in Prague, and it was minus whatever. And I'm going, what's the temperature? She says, well, it hit minus 30 on the weekend. I'm going, well, how did we flood out? The sprinkler system blew on Friday night and ran all weekend. Okay, and took out. So fortunately, our office was set up in a long stretch, and the reception area was right at the front, and so was the boardroom. That gone, totally gone. And so I just said, well, I'm not coming home. Deal with it. Okay, I'll be home when we're coming home. I got back. The business was down for 48 hours. They had ran extension cords. They moved people. There's network cables running through. There's sheets of plastic up. This isn't a large company. I had 4 full-time people and about 20 part-timers. They pulled it all together, but that was the beauty of delegating and giving them the responsibility and engaging them. And so the big message of Get More Life is really to get more life out of your business. One of the things I enjoyed doing absolutely was visiting clients and socializing. Jared, you know that, you know me. I absolutely love that stuff. And but one of the worst things to do, I'm not a note taker. So I'm with a client and we're talking about a project. I'm not taking any notes. I get back to the office and they go, what are we doing? I'm going, hang on, I got to get this all together. So again, in this training is I would bring a key person along with me. And I said, your job is to take notes, because the problem is when you're in a meeting and all you have to stop and say, oh, no, okay, client wants this. I've totally disengaged from what you're saying. So I wouldn't do that. That's why I didn't take notes. So they took notes. But what also happened was kind of a side effect, but it was brilliant when in hindsight, and I'll take credit for it, but it wasn't planned. is all of a sudden the client got to know the key supervisor, and I could step out of the picture. So I only had to be there to start, and at the end, all the other communication that went on was between them because they knew each other. I went, oh, I'm brilliant.
Wait, no, speaking of getting to the end, Greg, we are getting to the end of the segment. Sure. Sean, is there any last minute questions you'd like to ask before we wrap up?
No, Greg, honestly, I mean, it's very insightful what you're saying, and I think very well timed for everybody during this recovery. I think, honestly, if you can take positives from this awful experience, is that people have been taking a look at their life and realizing that the job they're in doesn't make sense, or the career that they're trying to pursue doesn't make sense, and that they do want more time for themselves. And as you said, it's all about preparing yourself, your business, to be able to allow that. Because otherwise, how do you find the time? It's easy to waste away every hour of your life focused on your business when you should be delegating and looking at how you get more out of your own life.
Yeah, the point that the last point that I just want to make, you shouldn't be the hardest working person in your company. That's really it. It's evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. It's not going to happen in 10 seconds, but you shouldn't be the hardest working person. You're there to guide. 80% of your time should be helping your people get better. You should be the consultant that you hire for yourself to help your people do their job. You're not to be doing the job. All roads don't go to Rome, so to speak. No, it's the other way around. You need to free up to be available to help your people. If they got a problem, step in, help them, guide them, let them go. But if you're so freaking busy, you're blind to what's going on.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. So today on the Pivoted Success Podcast, we were joined by Greg Weatherdon, author, writer, entrepreneur extraordinaire, writer of the Get More Life Out of Your Business, which can be found at Amazon. And Greg, before we wrap up, how can somebody get in touch with you, please?
Probably the easiest thing is to go to my website. It's gregweatherdon.com. And my contact information is there. But quite frankly, it's easy. It's greg.weatherdon at W, the number 10, N, the letter N.ca.
Great. Well, thank you. So we were joined by Sean Cochran, our co-host from TCC Canada, and myself, Jared Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events. Greg, thanks again. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Sean. Great chatting. Thanks, Jared.